Fixing a hot running 380 or 500 SL. So a number of 380 SLs and especially also 500 SLs I've seen run hot. New radiators, they still run hot. I don't know, new water pumps, new thermostats, coolant flushes, totally clean cooling system, they still run hot. When do they run hot? They run hot when it's 95 degrees outside and you're barreling down I-95 at 80 miles an hour with your AC on. And what do? They go to 100, 105, 103 Celsius. They're just up there. Now, anybody who knows anything about Mercedes aluminum V8 engines knows that this is how the blocks get a little fatigued from running too hot, and then the threads that hold the head bolts in want to pull out. And yeah, people say, oh, they're designed to run at those speeds. That's fine. You know, sure, they'll do it all day. But if you want your Mercedes to run as good as it possibly can, sometimes it's a good idea to look at some of the later models and see how they solved these problems. And one thing I know is that the 560, even though it's a bigger engine, it doesn't have those issues that the 380 and the 500 do. And if you think about the 380 is kind of an anemic engine compared to the 5.6 liter engine. It's not pumping the fuel and exhaust gas through that the 560 does. So what do you do? Well, I've got a couple of solutions for you that might be of interest. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the water pump conversion. Behold, this is a stock 380 pump. It came off of my friend Tim's 380 SL, and it's actually a good pump. It didn't leak. It's a Mercedes pump. You see the Mercedes star on the impeller. But there are some fundamental design flaws in this pump that kind of make it a dud. So the first thing is that it has this huge pulley. If you look at this pulley, this is a big freaking pulley. If we know anything about pulley diameters, the bigger they are, the slower they turn. So this is really big. Second of all, you have this narrow little window. Top goes back to radiator, bottom is from radiator. And there's really, if you look at this, there's really not a lot of access for coolant. Now I'm saying this because a lot of people who own these things, you know, they'll spend the money to get a water pump put on at some point to try to alleviate this problem, but it doesn't mean that the problem is going to go away. And it's because of these, what I call fundamental design flaws in this pump. Now, these pumps were designed to make the engines run hotter for emissions purposes. So now we understand. And what they did is they put the thermostat housing up here. This is facing the wrong way, but this thermostat housing goes, this thermostat goes in the top of the pump in this hole, and then this thing points towards the intake manifold. So the funny thing is not all these cars have this issue, and it also depends on the climate you live in. If you're like my friend Paul and you have a 500 SL and you live up in Maine, and the climate there is always pretty mild and you're not doing 80 miles an hour for prolonged stretches with your air on, the car's not going to overheat. But then when it's 95 degrees outside and your AC's on and you're running in the right lane and in the left lane, you know, trying to get all the speed you can get, that's when this problem begins. And a lot of it has to do with where this thermostat is. The thermostat acts as a restrictor to the degree that the engine can't get enough water circulated through. And on top of that, because these pumps have this massive, I would call it a behemoth of an integrated pulley. I mean, it's just huge. It's too big. It's really just too much pulley. This behemoth pulley just can't push the water through fast enough. So the solution is the 560 pump. The 560 pump has the same mounting face. It takes the same bolts, same gasket. So we know it bolts up to the engine, but what's the difference? Well, there are two differences. First of all, this thing at the top no longer holds a thermostat. It is just a pure water housing. You don't have the goofy vent hose that you don't really need. And you have unrestricted access from here to the distribution pipes inside the intake manifold. Then they put the thermostat here, and if you look at this giant opening, this is where the lower radiator hose would come in. This is where the upper hose would come in. Instead of having this tiny little restrictive housing that they split up for the upper and lower hoses, they let the lower hose just flow right through here, and the upper hose flows out of a port in the top, like it's supposed to. Ironically, they did this on the 450, and then they reverted back to that design on the 560. But on the 450, there were still some inadequacies related to pulley size, and that's where we really have to start looking at the design of the 560 again. This has a now there's a pulley that bolts on over this, but that pulley is about 40% smaller than the pulley on this pump. It still takes the same belt size. So if you have a 1,000 millimeter belt, and an 1,100 millimeter belt on your 380, that's what it's going to take. If you have a 1,110 millimeter belt on your 500, just like a 560, that's still the belt size it's going to take. But that pulley, because it's so much smaller, spins the impeller faster, and coupled with this lack of restriction brings the temperatures down. How far down, you ask? Well, on the car that this water pump that I was using as a demo came off of, the temperature was brought down by, it was running most of the time on the highway at 98 to 100 Celsius. And the installation of that water pump brought the temperature down to about 87 degrees, which is perfect. 85 to 87 degrees. So that's pretty substantial. That's like 11 degrees at worst. You know, I think the highest temperature I saw in that car after I put the water pump on was 90. Under similar circumstances, I would have been at 102 or 103 with the old pump. So it brought it down 11 to 12 degrees, which is extremely good. That's like a win. That's a major win. On another 1982 380 SL that got a new radiator, a cooling system flush, and a bunch of other repairs, we tried to get the temperature down using all kinds of methods, putting heavy-duty silicone oil in the fan clutch, for example. But we could not get the temperature down past 98 degrees at any given time. We did the 560 pump conversion on the car, and it went down to 81 to 82 degrees. Perfect. It was like different car. Never got hot ever again. Every single part you need to do this, the housing, the thermostat, the upper housing, the gaskets, the pulley, all is available from Mercedes. They have plenty of everything. They're not going anywhere. They're reasonably priced. You can do this conversion for around $500 in parts and about 5 hours of labor. And sure, it's not the fastest, but it will save your engine block and your heads and your head gaskets from leaking oil and the threads from coming loose. So if you found this video useful and informative, please like, share, and subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications. And remember that this can be done on any Mercedes, and any Mercedes with a V8 engine, an M116 or M117 V8, and except for a 560 or a 420, because they don't need it. But anyway, I hope you guys got a lot out of this video, and I look forward to sharing more great tech tips with you about your classic Mercedes.